come up here and keep working?
No. I feel so either. I just was trying to help support the art.
Yeah, he told me that. Right there, yeah.
Can you hook me up?
Everybody gather around, if you would, on this side of the platform. So all of you train gazers, we knew this was going to be standing room only, and I understand that the remarks have promised to be brief. So I'm going to give everybody a moment to gather around. And right now, it is my distinct honor to introduce the Honorable Jeffrey S. Worrell, Mayor of the town of Pulaski. Mayor Worrell.
I feel like I was in a beauty pageant walking up those ramps. Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. We're here this morning to, at long last, dedicate the brand new, expanded Raymond F. Ratcliffe Memorial Transportation Museum. First, there are a few people I want to recognize. We have a number of elected officials here this morning. From the House of Representatives, 9th District, Congressman Morgan Griffith is here somewhere. For Virginia State Senate, we have Senator Philip Puckett here this morning. And we have the entire Pulaski Town Council here this morning. Vice Mayor Joseph Goodman, Dave Clark, Jamie Ratcliffe, H.M. Kidd, Greg East, and Heather Steele are all with us this morning. From the Pulaski County Board of Supervisors, we have Charles Boff and Dean Pratt, and there may be others. Those are the only two I've seen. And we also have from the town of Dublin, Mayor Benny Skeens is here this morning. And I hope I haven't left anyone out. If I have, that's entirely John White's fault. So. This is a great day. 1 year, 10 months, and 3 weeks ago, we stood across the street and celebrated another great day. That was the day we rededicated our beautiful historic Pulaski Railway Station. And on that day, we dreamed about this day. And here we are in this beautiful museum. Now, some of you thought this day would never happen. Now, didn't you? Be honest. This museum grew out of late Mayor Raymond Ratcliffe's dream to create a town museum. A few years after Mayor Ratcliffe's passing, this museum was dedicated in the basement of the town municipal building, where it remained until the town acquired and renovated the Pulaski Railway Station. And it was moved to that building, where it became quite the fine little museum that we all remember. And as all of you know, we lost that building and our museum to a terrible fire in November of 2008. But long before the fire, it had become apparent that our museum, as nice as it was, wasn't big enough. We had some of the wonderful displays that you see here, but we had no room. By the time we lost that building in 2008, plans for this building were already underway. Unfortunately, recovering from that fire delayed this project for a couple of years. But here we are. Betty Lou Kirtner, Raymond Ratcliffe's daughter, has volunteered thousands of her hours of her time to our museum, and she did it out of the unwavering love for her community and in memory of her father. Betty Lou used to call me when she was on Sunday afternoons when she was volunteering at the museum, and we would talk for hours about our dreams for this building. And Betty Lou, I hope you will agree this turned out better than we dreamed. Dr. Milton Brockmeyer, local dentist and beloved friend of us all. Most of my life I heard stories about Dr. Brockmeyer's train set. Dr. Brockmeyer, I was told over and over, has this train set in his basement that is a model of downtown Pulaski. And it wasn't until a few years ago when plans for this building were underway that I actually went to Doc's house and saw that train set, and that day I was convinced that we had to make this museum a reality. That Doc's train set must be preserved for future generations for this community. And for much of his life, Dr. Brockmeyer's dream was to have his train set on public display. And sadly, Doc didn't live to see this become a reality. He was here for the groundbreaking of this building, as some of you will recall, and he told this wonderful story about going in the ladies' room at a truck stop by mistake. And I don't know what that had to do with anything, but it was a delightful story. And for those of us that were there, it's certainly something you'll never forget. But Doc is with us always in spirit, and you're going to hear some more about his train set in a few minutes. When I was a little boy in Cub Scouts, we would tour the firehouse. And they had an antique fire truck on display there. And the fireman given the tour would tell this heroic story about this terrible fire in the town of Whittle and how they put this fire truck on a train and rushed it to Whittle and it helped save the town of Whittle. And as a 10-year-old boy, that story would just knock me out. Now, for the past few weeks, I've been trying to verify that story, but no one seems to remember it except me. So while I don't know if that story is true, I know that fire truck is real because it's right there. 1917 LaFrance Company. We're also very fortunate to have on display the town of Pulaski's original mechanized fire truck, a 1909 International Harvester. And that fire truck was purchased after the terrible Garmore Hunt fire of December 1909. We have that truck on display through the generosity of the Robert Hudson family. Bob Hudson located that truck, purchased it, restored it, and he and his family donated it back to the town of Pulaski. And over the years, this community's had no bigger fan and supporter than Bob Hudson. And we are delighted to have Bob and Beverly Hudson here this morning. Bob, your town thanks you, and thank you and Beverly for being here this morning. Of course, no museum in the town of Pulaski could be complete without paying tribute to the Maple Shade Inn. This magnificent structure, built by the railroad on this very property, was known throughout the country. And although it's been gone now for 50 years, it is and probably always will be an iconic symbol of this community. And we have a number of wonderful artifacts from the Maple Shade on display here. In fact, the first thing you'll see when you come in the door is a stained glass rendering of the Maple Shade created and donated by Ed Isbell. So in tribute to the Maple Shade and in honor of its final owners, Mr. and Ms. Tom McCarthy, the front gallery of this museum will from this moment forward be known as the Jane O. and Thomas J. McCarthy Gallery. And I'm thrilled to see my great and wise friend Tom McCarthy Jr. here this morning. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. Thank you.
And I've touched on just a few of the hundreds of artifacts and displays we have here at the Ratcliffe. I could talk all day about the rest, like Jim Peters' 1953 Buick Skylark, Bill Pettigo told me he got to sit in it the other day. I'm afraid to touch it. I do want to pause for just a moment to recognize a very special group of people, our town employees. There has been an enormous amount of work done in this building in the past week. If you were here a week ago, or even the day before yesterday, you would never have dreamed that we would be ready for this ceremony this morning. But they made it happen, though. They always do. And thank you all. They were, of course, under the direction of the faithful and unfailing leadership of the always cheerful and always smiling Dr. John White. So thank you, Mr. White. Seriously, without John White and the folks at Public Works, we would not be here. And we are proud this morning to have with us not only Raymond Ratcliffe's daughter, Betty Lou Kirtner, but also Betty Lou's son and Raymond's grandson, Ty Kirtner. And Ty's devoted the last few years to making this museum a reality because that's what his mother wanted, and that's what boys do for their mother. Ty's going to talk for a few minutes about his family connections with this museum, and I don't know that Ty appreciates this much, but I always like to introduce him as old number 73 for the orange and black, because that's the number he wore when he played football at the old Pulaski High School. In fact, Betty Lou, as only a mother could, displayed a photograph of Ty in his uniform at the train station across the street. But alas, that photograph was lost to the flames. But we do have little Tyler Kirtner's soapbox derby car right here. So Ty, if you don't mind hopping in that for just a moment for a photo. This is my good friend Ty Kirtner. And thank you all for coming out to the Raymond Ratcliffe Memorial Transportation Museum.
No, I can't come close to getting into that. So, what an incredible day for us as the Ratcliffe family. There are a lot of emotions, and I think you just heard from Mayor, if Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. But what a joy and privilege it has been to join with so many people that have had visions for the structure that you see here. The front, we've divided it into 3 sections earlier during the design, and everyone has had an incredible part in making sure that this happens. And I want to thank everyone that's been involved. I want to echo Jeff's sentiments concerning the workers and the people of town of Pulaski. If you have been here the last 5-6 months, you've seen incredible work. If you have been involved with the design of it, you've seen people that have cared desperately about how it was done and when it was done. You've seen John White work tirelessly to organize. The storyboards that you have around you are almost exclusively his ideas as far as being able to display what we have here. So I want to thank so many people before we get started. And first of all, I want to thank you for coming. And also want to echo the fact that this is just the beginning of our museum. We have a lot of work to do. We need to make sure we're not a burden to the town of Pulaski, and we want to go back and be restored to greatness. One of the things I want to bring up today is the vision that my grandfather, Mayor Ratcliffe, had of this facility. One of the things that my mother tells me was his favorite quote was, "We need to know who we are and from whence we came." And I think that's absolutely important today. There are a lot of reasons for us not to be excited about our community, about a lot of things, our nation and those kind of things, but it was because of people like my grandfather who had ideas and have knowledge of how we could be great and how we could do things, even though it didn't seem to happen. And that was his vision. And he called for those in our community to begin bringing little trinkets, he would call them, as treasures. And you have many of those treasures before you today. I don't know exactly what his motivation was in a lot of things as far as the museum goes, but I do know that he probably saw the greatness that we were as the town of Pulaski. And I had no idea about a lot of these things until I began working with the model and trying to see what was there. I did not realize how we were called the gem of the South in some locations, how we were looked at, and how people in the community looked at and seriously thought that we would probably be the Pittsburgh of the South before we were done, because of our minerals and because of our manufacturing and all those kind of things. We have opulence in buildings that is unparalleled from a lot of the communities that we border. We had people that would come into the area because of resources. Culturally, we had things to experience that I just was absolutely unaware of. So today, I want to echo my grandfather's sentiments that the town of Pulaski at one time was a great place to live. And I want to echo that we can be there again, and I think this is an incredible start. It's about community, it's about people getting together and doing things in tough economic times and tough challenges and making it work. After 20 years, today this building is a reality. And yes, my mother did ask me, and has never asked me for a thing in my life, but to find a way, to find a place to put Doc's trains. And we'll talk about Doc's trains here in a second, but if you have ever seen them before, if you had seen them in the basement, you would know that we had to do something about them. And that was the key for me. Once I saw that, I'm like Jeff, once I saw it, we had to make it part of who we were that you could share it. Mom wanted to make sure that we would remember those who have gone on before us that were part of the vision and part of the dream. Of course, Dr. Milton Brockmeyer, Clarence Gallimore, Andy Graham, Willie Ryan, Doc Holliday, and I'm sure there are more. And again, I apologize if I miss anyone, but you would, if you knew them, you would know their vision, you would know their heart, you know they were trained people. And by the way, we've made it so far without a train whistle, and if we do have a train whistle, I want to explain something to you. There will be a certain population in our group here that will be gone, and you'll get run over if you're in the way, because they're trained people. They help restore this, but if they hear a train whistle, they're going to those tracks as soon as it happens. So please don't be in the way. I see most of them back here. So as they have worked tirelessly, one day I was in the back helping, and we were sawing some buildings, and the next thing I know, I hear whoo, whoo, boards drop, tools hit the floor, and I'm the only one standing in the building at that time. So just be aware if about half of us leave the room. Doc's trains. What a name! What a name for what we have behind us. When I heard Doc's trains, Mom said, "You got to go see Doc's trains." I'm like, I don't get trains. I don't understand trains. I never had trains growing up. But it's not just Doc's trains. This is the depiction of a community circa 1950 to 1960 that is so exact. Such a replica of who we were in a prosperous time, who we were for memories, that it's not just trains, and we'll talk about a lot of those things. I wanted to give you some facts today, and I did write them down because you'll see some of them are a little, they're not shady, but they're a little difficult, and if I mess them up, I might say some things that I really didn't want to say. But yes, Pulaski, all of this was in Doc Brockmeyer's basement. And not only that, there was a freelance section that started down here and wrapped probably almost close to where the ramp is today that we were unable to display. But every bit of this was in his basement, as phenomenal as that sounds. Yes, even a small town such as this can withstand attack from Wally Zilla. We're going to hear more about that later, but Wally Zilla was a friend of Wally's pet monkey that happened to get loose on the display, and I hope Wally discusses that a little bit later. But anything can be survived. The layout in place was 79 foot, 6 inches long, and 29 feet at its widest. I bring up 79 feet, 6 inches long because it was supposed to go along this back wall over here, and it was 79 feet. And I had no idea it was that long when we got into it. So it was incredible. The rumors have it that there were 2 additions to the house just so Doc could add more to the town in his basement. The next rumor is that if there had been another addition, there might well have been need to be marriage counseling or retraining on Doc's part from his new wife. But he just desperately wanted to increase it. There were factories that you see on each end that he didn't have an opportunity to display, and he desperately wanted to. He was just unable to do it. Doc, Willie Ryan, C.P. Huff, and a few others worked on the model for nearly 60 years. I don't know if you can imagine that. Most of us have trouble working on something a few days, like myself, but what a labor of love. The scale of the train layout, roads, buildings, signs, silos, telephone poles, trash cans, cannons, trees, clock towers, babies, dogs, cats, and even the oil can under the signal tower are all 1/4 inch to the footed scale. Incredible work. The flagpoles at both Jackson Park and the post office are operable and are placed at half-staff in honor of Doc. They still work, and I felt it appropriate to put them in half-staff. Every parapet wall, every roof is exactly to scale, and even the electric meters can be read for their usage. I'm sure Jeff is excited about that. Measurement and picture development for the construction of the model started as early as the late 1940s. Everything was used to convert the information to the model. Late night rides to measure the size of buildings, aerial photographs, old photos, and even old postcards were used in the application and the design. The depiction of detail was absolutely astounding. Ink dots were used to represent nails, blocks and bricks were to scale with proper lintels over the doors. Stick framing from wood structures was totally accurate with proper foundations. The loading dock for the train depot extension had over 2,900 ink dots representing nails in a plank. The loading dock, it is my estimate that there are at least 1 million dots on this display, not counting how many million of brick, block, and those kind of things there are. There are over 300 trains and 20 engines that I hope Doc will talk about a little bit more in detail. How many of you that are younger realize that we had a point where we had 7 widths of railroad track in the town of Pulaski? For most of us, we realize we have 1 track. There were 7 widths along Dublin or Door Highway as it existed in its heyday. The straightening of the creek that used to follow Pico Terrace is shown in the model, complete with construction equipment and clay soil. He used everything. He used coal, he used gravel, he used clay, he used anything he could find. Rocks from the yard, it didn't matter. The Dalton Theater building is so elaborate that it was made in 3 pieces with a removable top. Taking off the top reveals chandeliers hanging from the ceilings, every seat in place, gold medallions on every wall, and strings under the floor to move the curtains inside. There was certainly fun to be had by the creators of the treasure. If you had the opportunity, as I did, to pick up the buildings and look inside, you would see little notes that they used to write to each other, little things that they would tell, little people that they would mock also. There were, at the time, I guess there was a model kits that they could have for buildings, and they called them "You Build It" kits. Well, Willie Ryan didn't need any kind of assistance in building his building, so he would mock them at times by putting a letter I and then built it after it. He would sign them on the bottom, and sometimes he would create a picture of an I with "built it" on the back. So he would always seem to be mocking or making fun of something or one another, as you find on the bottoms of the model. Also, there's rumor that there's certain signs where they were having more fun than they should have. In particular, there's a rumor that Watson's store, one of the models, has a going out of business sale. And on this model on the front, it says odd socks, 5 cents. 3 shoes, $1.50. Pants with 1 leg, 40 cents. Women in bathing suits with no top, 35%. And he's put, "Oh boy." What a treasure the Brockmeyer family has given to us as a community. What joy it gives us today to present the building as the rightful home for this labor of love. I'd like to thank you very much for coming. Thank all of you involved, and what a joy this is and what a joy it will be for our community. Thank you very much.
Well, it's wonderful to see so many friends and here today, and so many people that I grew up with, and it's just I want to thank y'all for the turnout and for all your support. Like everybody else, the mayor and Ty, there would be no museum if it wasn't for Mrs. Gartner and Ty. These people, over the last several years, have spent it's unbelievable. I would spend hours up at Dad's house after he passed away, and I had the privilege of listening to Ty sing until 11 o'clock at night down in the basement. He and Pam were down there working. Miss Gartner took every little man and woman and trained and building it by hand. He cleaned them, and her sister Annie, they worked out. It's unbelievable the amount of time that they put in to make this dream come true. I know Daddy would be tickled to death, and Wilma Ryan and Clarence Gallimore and Doc Holliday and C.P. Huff and all the members of the train people that were together at that time that aren't with us today. But without Wilma Ryan, most of this would not be possible. He was such a talented artist. It's just unbelievable the work that he did. I also want to thank, it's been a long journey. It's been 20 years, and we've had our ups and downs, and we've wrung our hands and said, I'm done with it. This is it. Daddy said, honey, everything will be okay. Dad, it's been 18 years. I went in there. But I want to thank Mayor Jeff Worrell, who's also happens to be a wonderful neighbor of Daddy's. Many of his trees fell in Jeff's yard. And Jeff wouldn't even tell me about it, thank goodness, until they were cut up in the middle. I don't have my reading glasses on. The men from the Railroad Club that came up here from North Carolina, and Ty affectionately referred to them as the Merry Little Men. They did such a wonderful job, and like I said, the detail and stuff, unless you were raised with this and knew the detail and the work that goes into the engines and making them run and stuff is unbelievable. They're true craftsmen, and I appreciate all their work. John White has done a wonderful job on boards and everything that is working here. And the town members, the workers of this town, I see Mike back there and Phil, and we spend hours together and just cussing and carrying on and trying to get this thing out of Dad's house, because it had to be, there was one way to get into the basement, and that was one door that went down a set of steps. And so in order to remove it, we had to bring in, the town brought in equipment, heavy equipment, dug down about 12 feet. Took 2 days with jackhammers and chainsaws with carbide blades and everything, trying to drill a hole through the wall to get through so it could be removed that way. And the town workers were just unbelievable. They were such a pleasure to work with. They helped me at every turn of the road. I can't thank them enough. Billy Morgan spent I don't know how many hours down here recreating some of the paintings wrong, the concrete wall that were still in the basement of the house. And so Billy took hours and weeks and matched paint that was 60 years old, and it looked like Van Gogh down there, except he had both his ears. There's just so many people I want to thank, and I know I could go on and on for this thing, but I was a train enthusiast until I was about 10 years old, and then I had, and what would have been this section of the museum, I had a train set layout. Dad started me when I was about 4 or 5 with my train layout. Well, then unfortunately the Cuban Missile Crisis came along, and within 2 days Dad had my train set torn out and had started building a bomb shelter. None of his trains were touched at all. He built a bomb shelter to fit in around his trains, but now I said, well, if that's all you care about my trains, I'm done with trains, so I moved on to motorcycles. But anyway, I was pretty much banned from the basement of the house after, I guess I was around 12 or 13 years old. And I had a very good friend that was going to Pulaski or school with me, and his parents had moved out of town, and he was living with Dr. Brockmeyer and his wife, so he could continue to go to Pulaski. Well, Dad was also Dr. Doolittle of the community. Anybody that had a squirrel, we had squirrels running around the house, we had hawks, we had barn owls, we had anybody that found a squirrel or a bird with a broken wing, Dad would take baby bottles and nurse these things until they grew into dinosaurs. So, but anyway, this friend of mine came up, and it was in the middle of the winter, it was cold, and Mom and Dad were at a church meeting. And he knocked on the door, and he said, Wally, and he had a spider monkey in a cage. And I said, man, that is really neat, you know. And, I mean, we had an alligator. I mean, so this was, you know, but we didn't have a monkey. So he said, would you like this monkey? And I said, oh man, I love that monkey. And stuff. And he said, well, we'll be all right with your mom and dad. And I said, they're at church. I said, I'll let you know, but I'm going to put it down in the basement. And when they come home, I'll surprise them. When they came home, I surprised them. I said, Ed, come on down there. I want you to look at something. Well, we walked down the basement. And it was like King Kong had hit New York. This monkey had opened its cage that I found out later. But anyway, it was running up and down like it was taking buildings and hitting every telephone pole had threads. There were, I don't know how many hours they had put little threads to make the wires on it. It had torn everything apart. And went down there, and that monkey was going, maddest I ever saw my father in his life. He caught the monkey, he put it in the cage, he took it to the front door and set it outside, which wasn't like Dr. Doolittle. I said, Dad, that monkey will freeze to death. He said, don't ever bring that monkey inside. I took it back to the Dr. Brockmeyer's house. Unfortunately, they weren't there, so I took it in and put it in their shower. So I was pretty much banned from the basement from that time.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Miller with the Southbound Model Railroaders. Dr. John White called me in the fall of 2011 and said, we need your help in moving a train set. And that's all he said. Now, in a modeler's mind, a train set is something that fits in a box and can easily go in your car. And I found out different. So much for Dr. White's credibility. So Joe Zimmerman and I came to Pulaski in the fall of 2011, and we met with Dr. White, Bill Pettigo, Ty Kirtner, Heather Carter, Mayor Orell, and Wally. I was infected with their dream of this museum and moving the Brockmeyer layout. I went back home to Winston-Salem and discussed the museum plan and the layout details with the Southbound Model Railroaders, whose reaction was, you want to do what? Dr. Milton Brockmeyer and his friend, especially Willie Ryan, built his model railroad to have fun with trains. His inspiration came from his tremendous love of the city of Pulaski and its people, and the steady parade of trains outside his window, even today. Behind me is his work of art, talent, history, and technology. He built his layout to a scale of 1/4 inch to the foot. Everything on that layout is 48 times smaller than the real thing. Dr. Brockmeyer was a true modeler of the 1950s. He built his engines, cars, buildings, and track. In the 50s, nothing could really be bought at the store. He hand-laid his 2-rail, brass code 173 track on fiber and individual wood ties. The track is on roofing shingles to simulate the rock ballast. DC power came from Lionel Type V transformers from the 1930s and 4-inch selenium rectifiers. All of this power, and it was a lot of it, was connected to cloth wiring. His mountains are made of a combination of cement and plaster. Being a frugal man, he cleverly used scraps of wood, wire, cardboard, paper, and tin cans to create his dream. The Southbound Model Railroaders are extremely pleased to have had the opportunity to make this historic layout able to be enjoyed by everyone. When we first looked at the layout, In early 2012, we realized it was going to be a challenge to move the 80 by 30 foot layout. The layout was not designed to be moved and had been nailed to the 4 concrete walls. The electrical system was dangerously out of date and would have to be replaced. Engines had not run in years, needed to be rebuilt. The back hidden tracks had been totally destroyed by a sewage leak and needed to be replaced. The layout was below ground in his basement with no outside door. Dr. Brockmeyer filled his entire basement and there was not a ½ inch to spare. Clever Pulaskians, as you have already heard, hatched a scheme to dig down and remove a poured concrete basement wall. Steel was then used to hold the house up. A new driveway was added at the basement floor level to move the layout out of the house. SMR members carefully figured out where to cut the layout apart to do the least amount of damage and to aid in reassembly. During disassembly, SMR members told jokes and showed they were having a great time working on the layout, earning them the name The Merry Man. In a spirit of true respect and friendship, the Merry Men, dedicated city employees, Mark Bentley and Eddie Arnold, other Pulaskians, and of course, John White and Ty Kirtner, loaded the 17 heavy sections on a 30-foot lowboy truck. The parade through town lasted 2 days between Dr. Brockmeyer's house and Ratcliffe in June of 2012. The layout went back together, missing only a quarter of an inch, thanks to the careful planning and work of Michael Krotz and Brian Whitcomb. SMR members spent over a dozen 2.5-day weekends in Pulaski straightening the layout, fixing water damage, rewiring everything, painting track, and cleaning from the monkey, and building an entire 80-foot section, and polishing track. The work was done by Club President Rob Morrison, Vice President Richard Bradford, and the Rembrandts, Jerry Brown and Joe Zerman, so named because they fixed the backdrops that had been ruined. David Crabtree, a local guy from Marion, Roy Faw, Larry Linville, Mark Schroeder, Ed Radzawanska, Larry May, Steve Meyer, and our youngest member, who was only 14, Bennett Meyer, actually welded track together. We appreciate the assistance of Ty Kirtner and cleaning and moving the buildings and being of help to us with the layout. The model railroaders are marking their 40th year of having fun with trains. We invite you to come to Winston-Salem and see our building and our club layout. Dr. Brockmeyer left you a model of your town. He built the buildings out of cardboard and cereal boxes, and he used his talent to make them like the Pulaski of the 1950s. His hand-built N&W engines represent the latest steam engines running in America. The Class A, the Class J, the Y6s, the Ks, and the Ms. He also added the Southern Railway engines that you see, the diesels, because they were on the Birmingham Special that came through here. He built his early diesels. He added people, chairs, and tables to the inside of the passenger cars, one of which is open on Dr. Brockmeyer's workbench over there. His track placement came from the N&W blueprints of Pulaski. The Brockmeyer layout is a treasure for the town of Pulaski. It is a treasure for the state of Virginia. It is a treasure for our country because it is the largest 1950s constructed model railroad on public display in the U.S. The layout is an educational tool for your community, a tourist attraction, and will hopefully encourage others to follow in Dr. Brockmeyer's and his friend's steps and have fun with trains. I can tell you that on behalf of the club, we certainly enjoyed meeting you, all of you, and working here was probably the biggest benefit we got. Thank you.
So articulate and funny. And this is the part you've been waiting for, concluding remarks. You know, a museum is a living thing. We often think of it as a repository or an archive, but it's really about education. It's about learning our past so that we don't repeat it, and pointing ourselves toward the future so that we can better understand and articulate how the past and the future can be conjoined. Living thing means it's always changing. I hope you will enjoy what you see today, because when you come back next time, there will be changes. Chris Burry Covey. Chris, are you here? Chris Burry Covey, some of you may remember the Burry family, who were owners of the Washington Cafe on Washington Avenue. Chris grew up in Pulaski, and she and I have been, she lives in Wilmington, North Carolina now. She and I have been talking about a new display, drive-ins and dives in Pulaski. That's going to be a great display. There are other things yet to be. We have a storehouse of items to be displayed. Most importantly, you have items that we would love to display. And we have a collections committee that would love to see what you have. Can't take everything. Our focus is on transportation and commerce, but we would love to see what you have so that it could join in the collection. Finally, I would like to recognize a classmate of mine whose name is on that board over there that discusses the model railroader C.P. Huff. Her name is Dee. Hold up your hand. And she gets the prize today. If we had a Virginia ham, honey, we'd give it to you. But we don't. She has come to us today from Battleground, Washington. And that's a fur piece from Pulaski County. So Dee, we appreciate your loyalty and your honoring your dad. And we hope all of you will now embrace the Ratcliffe. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, I want to get a better shot of that. Alrighty.
Where on here was his office?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, where the church is up here, right off this block there.
Is that the second hall or the first hall?